Yeah, it's Wednesday morning, August 19th? Yes, 19th. And getting ready to haul some corn today is kind of the main objective. See how long the line is at the ethanol plant. If it's going to be a long wait, I might haul some tomorrow and some today. We're going to get loaded up and take one over and kind of see what the situation is. So I've got set up the auger last night, got the truck in position, but it was getting dark, so I waited till this morning to load. So right now I need to get backed up underneath the auger. Well, my supervisor thinks it's time for a nap, or at least some relaxation in a cool spot. But I think I'm gonna pull the combine out. So it hasn't been run since it was parked here in early December. The batteries, I think, are up. They were new last year, and the fan and stuff kicked on in the cab when I tried yesterday. So hopefully it'll fire up and we can get it pulled out. I need to finish up some stuff up in the grain tank with the tank unloading augers, or the horizontal augers in the bottom of the tank that unload, and also the shields and some stuff around the tank loading auger from the gearbox that I put in here a 3 weeks ago. And it's a lot easier since it's nice and we don't have too much going on right now. We can kind of clear out the shop and get that out where we can work on it out on the pad here in front of the shop and have some more room to get over top of that grain tank extension, because there's only maybe a foot or 18 inches clearance between the top of the tank extension and the ceiling, which then means you have to sort of crawl in and out, and it's a real pain to get tools and stuff in, and you don't have very much overhead space. I guess I apologize for the background noise. Dad extracted honey today, so he's got the extractor kind of drying out at the moment. So we're gonna see if the combine will start up. No warning lights, rock and roll. I don't remember if I took any video late in the process on the four-wheeler yesterday. I ended up called a dealer, and centrifugal clutch from the OEM at least. I'm not exactly sure if Suzuki makes their own stuff. Was going to be a couple $100, and they had to order it from California, so it was going to be a week. So I decided I might as well just order my own from California aftermarket for half as much money. Actually a little bit less than that, because it comes with the gasket, and I'm pretty sure from Suzuki I would have had to order the gasket separate. But we have the Carnage from the old one here. Still have no idea what caused that to blow up. I was just going down the road. I mean, the sprayer was full, so it had a little bit of a load on it, but I've done that quite a bit in the past. But the part that I wasn't sure if I got on video, I ended up finding the at least some of the Carnage from those springs that were supposed to hold the weights together. They were kind of in the bottom of the crankcase. I've got the cover back on now, so you're not going to be able to see, but where I got the plastics over top here, so probably the camera's going to be too dark to see anything. Anyway, where this drive shaft comes out right in here to drive the front axle for the four-wheel drive is kind of like a low spot, and there's a passageway from that clutch cavity down into there. So I stuck a magnet down in there and moved it around, and eventually fished out a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully that's most of it, and there isn't too much metal floating around inside the engine transmission area anymore. But probably I'm gonna change, or at least check, the oil filter after a few miles and see what it looks like, and may sort of do a couple short interval oil changes to kind of try to get as much of the crap flushed out of there as I can. The next step in the saga of the grain tank repair stuff is I need to get the bearings put on this side, and then basically the other side is all in, but the bearing bolts aren't tight, so the bearings can still pivot in the housings or the flange brackets. So we need to get the stuff on this end, and then make sure that the augers turn freely and don't rub on anything. They look to be pretty straight. The new aftermarket augers look to be pretty straight rolling along the shop floor, but Need to make sure that there's not a high spot or anything that it's going to rub on the new stainless liner, because that did add probably 3/30 seconds maybe. I think it's a little less than an eighth to the bottom, and we now have brand new augers that should be full size also, or no wear on the edges of them. So I'm going to have to probably take a little bit of emery cloth and clean up some of the rust on these shafts, so that the bearings will slide on, and then get the flanges and bearings on here and kind of get stuff loosely positioned. These bolts are fun because you have to simultaneously hold them from behind magically, because there's no way to get in there, and put a nut on the outside. So that might be an interesting time. There is a trick you can do with a putty knife to like jam the threads to be able to get nuts started on bolts like that, but it might be a little tricky, since the easy way to put the putty knife is also going to shove the carriage part of the bolt out of the slot. Anyway, I'm going to get some emery cloth and get these cleaned up a little bit, shine up the rust there, and get stuff slid on, and once everything's kind of sliding freely, we'll figure out what we need to do for those bolts. Shafts are shined up, so the bearings are sliding on relatively easy. I did notice one thing. So these are aftermarket augers from a source that is maybe not the best. As aftermarket stuff goes, there's Shoop and A&I think tend to be pretty good, or pretty close to OEM quality, and then a lot of the other stuff can be a little bit hit or miss. I have had some augers from this company before and got along pretty well with them, and these look really serviceable. But I do notice, like, one of the things that I have noticed on some of the shafts that I've had from this source is that they tend to do keyways with an end mill, so basically a rotating cutter that leaves a rounded end on the where you stop cutting, instead of like a rotary keyway cutter or a broach type process that gives you a nice taper. And typically this can be a little bit hit or miss as far as if the keyway is the right size, and they aren't necessarily super careful about making them the right length. So I'm hoping that that doesn't cause us problems. I suppose I should probably go grab the keys and make sure that they're going to fit in there and slide okay before I get the bearings mounted up on here, because that is one issue that we've had with some of their stuff in the past. I kind of try to be a little bit selective about the stuff that I get from the lowest cost provider. Like I said, I've had pretty good luck with augers from this place before. Some stuff is a little bit hit or miss, or there are a few things that you notice not being quite the same as OEM. For pre-season maintenance like this, hopefully we've got time to figure that out and make it work. As I feared, keyways are narrow. I guess too narrow is better than too wide, because I can take some time with file and emery cloth and make this work. And if it was too loose, that would be harder to fix. That is a little annoying. So probably I'm going to take the emery cloth first and try to get down in there and hopefully not slice my finger up on the other side. And then if I need to use, I've got a triangle file and a straight file that I'll hopefully be able to get that opened up just a little bit, so that those keys will go in decent. It seems like they're both a little bit tight. I didn't measure, but when you make keyways with an end mill like that, I don't think your tolerances are very good, so not too surprising. So I've spent a little bit of time trying to clean this up, and it's still pretty tight on the key, so I decided to get out dial caliper, I should say, and see what this actually measures. I think some stuff is metric on this combine, but I'm pretty sure this should be a 1/2 inch keyway, and we're at least 10th thou under. So what's going on here, I think, is, well, you can tell. So see how there's a circle machining mark there, tooling mark, or some circle marks? They're just taking a 1/2 inch end mill and hogging that out. I think the correct way to do that would be to either use some sort of a cutter, but probably make one pass and then make another pass back, so that you're not cutting on both sides of the tool or cutting on the front side, so you're cutting on the side that you want finished. Because if you have a worn tool, then you end up with an undersized keyway and an unhappy farmer. I also have a feeling that They may have like made multiple passes, so the sides probably are not super smooth. They don't look too bad from this angle, but it seemed like there were some horizontal marks when I looked earlier. I haven't checked this one yet. This one didn't seem as tight. I haven't cleaned it up yet either, so we'll see what we get. Yeah, so it's within 5, which is a little bit better, and that's without being cleaned up. So this one probably is okay, but I think these are made in the US somewhere, but being low priced and made in the US, probably not the most skilled machining labor. After about half an hour of screwing around, maybe more than that, we got these decent, not perfect, but decent. I am pretty sure this is 1/2-inch key stock. It measures 495, 496 on that dial caliper that I had. And I think that's supposed to be a 1/2-inch slot. Although it did seem like the keys fit pretty tight on the old augers as well, and they were cut right and from a John Deere. I didn't clean them up at all, so there probably could be some rust. And I'm sure there's a lot of these augers that get put in with a hammer, either just whacking the keys into the keyways to make them fit, or grinding or sanding down the keys to fit the keyway. I hope that I never have to take this apart, and you can kind of get away with that, I guess, to some extent. But with these fancy no-name Brazilian bearings that I got from the John Deere dealer and paid plenty for, there's no guarantees of that, and even if I don't have to take it apart again, there's a good chance somebody does, so I really don't like to do things that are going to aggravate my life or their life in the future, because I've had to deal with enough of that stuff on used equipment and vehicles and whatever, that just try to do it right. I guess I should also mention that even though I've screwed around with this for a little bit to try to get it right, because it wasn't right as it arrived here, they were enough cheaper than other sources, both in terms of shipping and the item itself, that probably, unless I'm paying myself a pretty high hourly wage, it's worth it to deal with a little bit of this stuff, as long as it's when I have time to deal with it, like pre-season. If something broke in season, I would probably be more apt to get it from a different source, maybe. Where these came from, I can drive to and pick stuff up, and sometimes that's more attractive, even when you have to deal with stuff like this, versus waiting for 2 or 3 days and paying express shipping from somewhere else, dealer or otherwise. Well, I think I figured out a procedure. What I did was I stuck the carriage bolts in from the back side and then put this flange up here, and with the bearing nut there, you can stick your finger in and hold them from the back side. So I was able to get the nuts on the flange and then slide the bearing up into it. So at this point, I just need to get these bolts off of here without falling off on the inside, and then get the other half of the flange on and get the nuts back. Probably that top one might be the biggest problem, because I think these lower ones probably will have a little bit of weight on them from the auger. This one doesn't feel loose, so I think it'll be okay. That one feels like it has some pressure on it, so I think it'll be okay. So if I were feeling really brave, I may be able to get away without even needing the putty knife. But this top one is pretty loose, so what we're going to do is take a putty knife and catch the threads. And now I can drop or slide the other flange right in front of that and get the nut sorted on it, and the bolt won't push because I've got the putty knife wedged down into those threads there. Probably some kind of trippy perspective, but so we're short on that one. Started on number 2, and started on number 3. So what I'm going to do is just kind of tighten these up finger tight. So it should hold the bearing pretty close to its position, but it should have enough leeway at this point that it'll move. So we're going to turn this. Looks like it might be rubbing a little bit. So I'm going to have to go up in the grain tank and check that out. I think I've got a little bit of wiggle that I can push it up on the bearings if I need to. But I'm going to get this bearing on, same procedure as that. This one's in a spot that's probably going to make the lighting kind of bad, but getting pretty close on this. Got everything tightened up on the bearings, got the lock collars on. So because you're pulling grain to this side of the machine, you're going to be pushing against the bearing on the other end of the combine. So the way it's set up, that bearing goes like straight against or tight against the center tube of the auger, and then these just land somewhere on this stub shaft. But the way you establish the positions on these gears is in relation to this slot here for the snap ring, and then you have a stack of washers. And it seemed like when I put the ones back on that were on here before, this pulley was a little bit too far towards the grain tank, so I took one washer off of that. So I kind of did a dry fit without the key in the slot, and then went ahead and put the key in this one, but I haven't put the set screws in yet. So I think I'm going to get this one in. I kind of double check that everything seems like it's lined up, so I'm just going to take a straight edge and go across the pulley and see if I'm hitting the other pulley basically, or if it hits this pulley without touching this side here, then that means this one's too far out, or if I have a gap, then this one's too far in. And there is like a little bit of play with a chain, but you want to have stuff lined up as square as possible so that you don't unduly wear the teeth on your sprockets. So at this point, I've done the test fit, and I'm getting ready to put the key in this slot. So the way that I did it over on the other one at least was to get the snap ring pliers, go ahead and set those in, and then I know that the sprocket's going to line up or come right up against that, and it's going to be the hub side, so as long as I have the key right in there, that should be, the key is basically exactly the width of the hub. So this kind of goes through the plate as well, and then basically is welded onto the sprocket part. So I should be able to just tap this in right here. Now I will take the snap ring back off. Try not to drop it this time. Take our stack of washers back off. And put our pulley on. May need to do a little cleanup on the keyway on the sprocket on this one. I didn't actually test fit it with the key. So anyway, this is going to push on once I figure out what's binding, and then washers and snap rings going to go back on, check the alignment, and hopefully get stuff put back together.